So welcome back to another Impact Sessions podcast with me, Nick Bramley. I've got a great guest on this week. I've got Simon Brown, who's director of Sniffers Petcare, based in Huddersfield. We're going to explore a little bit about Simon's career and what took him from banking to biscuits. But when I say biscuits, dog biscuits really, and a bit more than that. So without further ado, Simon, welcome to the Impact Sessions podcast.
Hi Nick, yeah, that's great. Thanks for the invite.
That's all right. I'm looking forward to exploring this. You've had a high-flying white-collar career, and now you've got sort of a high-flying dog-collar career. I couldn't resist that. It was terrible, wasn't it? I apologise profusely. Everyone just turned off in droves at that. So we're going to explore your transition from what community describes a fast-track career. You worked with Lloyds Bank for a while, well, for a number of years, and now you're the driving force in a family pet treat business in Huddersfield. So I call it quite a pivot, but it wasn't a pivot in the traditional sense. A lot of people have pivoted because of COVID. Yours is nothing to do with COVID, really. So we'll explore that, I guess. So tell us about your original career path and what happened at Lloyds. Where did you get to? What did you achieve at Lloyds?
I guess to start off with, I always said I'd never work for the family business, and I said I'd never work with my dad. And so it's funny how things change over time. I went to university in Leeds. My mum actually was working for HPOS, which was acquired by Lloyd further down the line. I was studying marketing, and she arranged a meeting for me just to sit down and learn a little bit around what they do in marketing within the bank itself.
Was that part of the studies that Simon?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was just a module in the course, and it was just a good opportunity to get in and speak to people. Really, I found over time that the best thing to do is just try and get a conversation with someone, glean a little bit around what they're up to, and you can learn a lot just from that, really, rather than anything else. Mm-hmm. I had a sit down. The gent's name was Andy McLaughlin, who was the marketing director at HPOS at the time. Really enjoyed it. I had a good conversation around, what their environment was like, what the business was like, and sort of set my targets on joining HPOS. When I graduated from uni, I wanted to do a placement over the summer. Something came up where I could go and work for 3 months for free between the second and third year of uni. Again, landed in, loved it. Really great place to work at the time, actually.
Geographically, where was that, Simon?
I was in Leeds, yeah. I was at Lovell Park in Leeds.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was my sort of first venture into the real work environment, which was eye-opening compared to sort of university, I guess.
You had to knuckle down and do a full day's work, and there wasn't.
Yeah, exactly.
You couldn't roll in at 11 o'clock when you felt.
No. I couldn't watch DVDs laid on the sofa all day, like we used to do. But no, I loved it. Yeah, got on really well with the people and the team. And they actually asked me to work part-time through my last year of uni, which was a stroke of luck. They were under-resourced, and obviously I'd done 3 months and fitted in quite well. So that was good. It worked really well. So I barely attended the third year of uni, if I'm completely honest. I spent all my time working and trying to nail down a full-time job as soon as I graduated.
Yeah.
Was fortunate enough to make a positive impression, graduated on a Friday, started work full-time on the Monday.
Was there a carrot of a full-time job during this sort of working part-time, and you thought,
no,
it just something you were doing?
Yeah, I sort of backed myself a little bit. I was confident that I could, I knew in the first 3 months that I felt like I had the ability to progress and show enough, I guess, ability to get a permanent role. I sort of backed myself and did that. And I think that sort of helped me move quite quickly straight away. So I didn't have that period where I had to go look for jobs. I wasn't competing against other graduates. I was in, the day after graduation or the Monday after graduation. So yeah, it worked out well then. And I was in marketing for about 4 or 5 years around the time, and then things started to turn a little bit grayer as the financial crash hit. And HPOS was acquired by Lloyds, and we became part of the Lloyds banking group, which I guess looking back, I was naive. I didn't know what was going on at all. I remember the day we found out and we're all huddled around it. We were on an away day doing some volunteering in Huddersfield. And we were all huddled around a BlackBerry reading the sort of announcement and what was going on with the HPOS. And, I must have been 23, 24 at the time.
I suspect the announcement was pretty corporate. It didn't really answer any questions that you had. It was more, you know, well, we're telling you because this is what we have to do. We have to tell the market. We have to tell. Yeah.
Anyone that worked at HBOS at that time will know we're a strong bank. And we'll continue to be. It's just a part of line that you heard all the time, which is obviously what you've got to do. You know, it was. I'm sure it was behind the scenes. It was an incredibly difficult time, and knowing a little bit more around liquidity now, and I can't imagine the challenges they must have been facing. You know, over that period, it must have been incredibly difficult. But yeah, it was lucky enough. We were relatively unimpacted as a marketing function within Halifax. We ported straight over into the new business, and actually for me, it turned out to be, you know, really, really beneficial. You know, the avenue, the career opportunities just opened up in front of me as we operated, you know, across the country. And you know, we went to a sort of 80,000, I suppose it was close to 100,000 FTE across, you know, what was Lloyd CSB, HPOS at that time. So yeah, I just saw it as a real opportunity to progress and learn more than anything.
Excellent. So what was the acceleration of your career path at that stage? And what year are we talking about, or what roughly?
Yeah, so now we're probably up to about 2011. I was super ambitious, too ambitious as a young lad, or, you know, a relatively young lad at that time. And I wasn't making my moves in marketing. So I I applied for a job working as executive assistant or executive support to the group director for retail for Lloyds Banking Group as a whole in London. It was a bit of a strange story. I applied on the Friday and then went to Cheltenham races for the week after, sent an email saying I'm not available for an interview next week because I'm away.
I'll be honest with you. You're not going to interview well after a week at Cheltenham races either. I wouldn't have thought.
No, it was good. It was good. It worked out quite well, actually. So I came back in on the Monday to an email saying your interview was last Tuesday. Unfortunately, you missed it. So obviously I was devastated and got on the email. Didn't actually say I was at Cheltenham. Said I was on holiday, obviously. Luckily enough, managed to get an interview the next day. So I was shot down on the train to London. Had an interview with the exec assistant of the group director. That went really well. Then I had another interview with the chief of staff of the group, which went really well. And then ultimately got offered the job that I'd originally applied for, even though they'd already told me they got someone in the role. So I must have done something right in the interview, which was
somebody must have done something a bit wronger than you've done, maybe, or you don't know. You'll never know. But you never found out either, did you? So
no, the look of Cheltenham. That's what I'll put it down to.
That might be. Were you lucky at Cheltenham in that week? Can you remember or not?
Yeah, actually, I think I was. It was quite a good week, that one. Not too bad.
Okay. Well, you never see
a few bad ones.
You never see a poor bookmaker, though, do you? Okay, so
I certainly don't. Anyway.
So you've accelerated.
Yeah, so
you've gone to London.
That took me down to London. Yeah, that took me down to London. I then moved down to London, so I spent just over a year there, working in that environment, which was incredible. So, you know, I was almost starstruck at times because, you know, I would be 20, 26, 27. You know, you get visibility of the board, how they're operating. You know, even though no influence, you've got no say, but you sat in the corner and you're just soaking it all in. I had the opportunity to read as much as I could take in at the time, as much as I wanted to. Got a real understanding of, you know, how a retail bank functions, what sort of leadership characteristics I observed being, you know, positive for the masses, for the people, and yeah, just absolutely loved it. Not so much living in London, actually. I think professionally I enjoyed it way more than the environment outside. I talk a lot about environment, but I think it's quite critical to finding balance in your career, actually.
So at some stage you got to a head of function, youngest head of function under the age of 30. What was the banking environment like? I mean, I think when I think banking and city boys, I'm a lot older than you. I think 80s, braces, Filofax, yuppies, fast cars, all that kind of thing. What were the vices of the sector when you were down there in the sort of 2010 or whatever it might be?
I think, you know, that had passed. You saw the remnants of it, you know, being in the bars with the FT plastered all over the wall, there's wallpaper and champagne.
Yeah.
You know, you hear stories about it all, but when I was there, that had certainly passed. It was much more, actually, more socially focused as a bank. You know, they did, you know, there's a big, real push on mental health. You know, that became quite a strong story for the bank. You know, the weird thing is that's what probably caught me out. I'll touch on that a little bit later on, but it was a collaborative place to be. I think, you know, maybe, and you know, it becomes quite obvious. It's very numbers focused.
Yeah.
And that, you know, that's something I took away and will always have in my career, that if you don't know your numbers, then there's no point you being there. You know, you've got no credibility. You have to have it backed up by substance.
Yeah.
And that's clean through numbers. Absolutely. You can't just go in there and deliver a party line and hope that people will back you up.
Yeah, you got to have that sort of, like you say, the substance to support that. So you mentioned earlier, no intention of working with your family, no intention of working with your dad or for your dad, but at some stage you must have decided enough's enough and returned to Huddersfield. So what was the influence of that deciding factor, you know, and what was the conversation over Sunday dinner?
Yeah, well, being brutally honest, you know, I'd come out of London. I wasn't really enjoying living in London. I'd moved back to North. I was still working part-time in London. Integrating team again, I really enjoyed the job, but I was pushing too hard. And I was doing a lot of hours. You know, we were traveling down to London every week, burning the candle at both ends, as I'm sure you can imagine. And I crashed and burned. I just, totally crashed and burned. So I woke up one morning and thought, I can't really carry on like this. This is not for me. You know, my internal compass was out of sync, which led me to have quite a few honest conversations with myself about what I want to do. I'd obviously enjoyed my time at Lloyd's, but it became quite apparent that it's probably better for me to go in a different direction.
Can I just ask you, Sam, did you realise that, or was it a realisation because of an incident potentially? You know, sometimes these things creep up on you and you don't see them coming. You know, was it like, wow, I've just woken up one morning, I just can't do this again? What was was there a catalyst?
There wasn't a specific catalyst. It was that I went into work one morning, I got to my desk, and I stood up from my desk and I walked out and I never went back.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an extremely powerful moment, and it definitely caught me off guard. I guess no underlying there'd been an anxiety developing without a shadow of a doubt. And I'd held it all in, and I'd internalized it and tried to deal with it. And all the pressure was from me. It was all internal pressure that I was putting on myself. There was no external pressure from bosses or the company itself.
But you do strike me as ambitious, hardworking, and burn the candle at both ends, wanting to succeed. And sometimes that does. The candle meets in the middle, doesn't it? And like you say, the culture of the organisation wasn't encouraging it. It was almost self-encouragement to do that and want to do that, but you can only do that for so long. Just interestingly, in the podcast series, I don't know what number it is because I haven't looked, is Lorna Feeney, who is a specialist in mental health and mental health awareness and training. And that might be a good listen, not just for you, but for other people on here. If they've got any, they always say on Channel 4, don't they? If you have any concerns about this podcast, please, whatever. But Lorna's podcast about mental health awareness in a big organisation and what to look for and what the signs are. And sometimes you don't see it coming, do you? Really, it just hits you. Walking in and then deciding to walk out. It's a hell of a brave decision. I guess you probably had a safety net of being able to think about the family business as a stopgap. Was that how it worked?
No, if I'm totally honest, no. At that point in the business, my dad's stories, is a different chapter in the book, but they just sort of restarted the business, him and my mum, their distribution arm. And that was, in a very sort of embryonic state. They just got products into Pets at Home. But they were building it themselves. There wasn't necessarily capacity for me to join in. Yeah. Particularly, I was earning a few quid at the time.
I was going to say your salary expectations at Lloyd's would be very different to a family business.
Absolutely. Yeah. So they weren't necessarily met on entry, but that's just life, isn't it? Yeah. But no, I think I didn't understand, we talk a lot more about mental health, and there's obviously a lot more awareness around it now, but basic things like focus on sleep, exercise, watching what you drink, that sort of stuff you don't care about when you're 28, 29, 30.
Well, you're invincible.
It's not on your agenda.
You're invincible.
Absolutely.
In your 20s, yeah. Invincible in your 20s, but you realise when you get to a certain age, and I'm a lot more of a certain age than you are, that invincibility comes with consequences in terms of aches, pains, all that kind of thing. But also, like you say, you got to keep ahead of your mental health. So how did the transition, was there anything in between Lloyd's and Sniffers, or what was the transition?
No, so I ended up taking just a couple of months out, nothing too major. I had a lot of conversations with, obviously, my mum and my dad, particularly around, what I could personally do, what I could personally offer for the business, and then just took a leap of faith. I think, I backed myself. I always have backed myself, and I thought, well, there's opportunity to make a bit of a difference, and we can get this business ticking. We just had the Brexit referendum, which when it didn't necessarily go the way I personally wanted it, but that was
I think with hindsight, it didn't go the way that many people wanted or expected. It's been a complete and utter shambles, isn't it?
No, absolutely, but it certainly opened opportunities within the pet food market. Turbulence it always creates opportunity.
Yeah.
So we sort of built a strategy around capitalising on that, which today, touch wood, so far so good, really.
I'm assuming that includes things like supply chains and import, export, all that kind of stuff. Then, yeah.
Correct. So my understanding of the market at the time was a lot of goods was moved from the Far East into Europe, and they moved from Europe to the UK, which obviously made the transit into the UK particularly smooth and easy. You've got very little friction at the ports.
Yeah,
you can get gear straight into your warehouse. We went direct to India and started dealing. We started building a business, which is now probably 60% of our business, importing direct from India and bringing the goods over themselves, moving them at scale, which was a challenge at first. And I've never even touched any sort of import documentation or import process in my life prior to this, but it meant that we had a little bit more of competitive advantage in margin, which is obviously critical in commercial environment. But it also meant that we could be a little bit more flexible around how we position the products, rather than relying on a sort of European partner to deliver that.
So you're cutting out another one of the transition points.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I've got to ask you about family business, right? Okay, family businesses are notorious melting pots, aren't they? I always wonder when you work in a true family business. What I mean by that is your mum, dad, son, auntie, uncle, all that kind of thing. How Christmas Day goes if you've had a bit of a row in, so did you have any doubts about joining the family business in terms of thinking, well, this could, make or break the relationship I've got with my family? Because it can do sometimes. It can be quite.
Open and honest about it. It's caused ruptures in my wider family. So my dad was in business with his brothers and his dad prior to this, and they had their own troubles themselves. You hear horror stories around brothers, partnerships, everything falling apart. I guess me and my dad are very, very similar. So whilst we will fall out inevitably, it's probably because we're both the same person, just going in different directions. So as long as you can get it back on the same path, there's not too much of an issue. What I found, particularly at first, was everything blew up into an argument, and you'd shout and scream and swear. And obviously, you'd never do that normally in a workplace environment, and I couldn't really understand what was going on. But it's because there's no emotional filter. There is no emotional filter. There's no. You don't really have any consequences to what you say as you do in a traditional work environment.
Yeah, HR are not going to get involved between you and your dad, are they?
No, exactly. So once you realise that, then you can manage it a little bit more, and you can take a pause before you blow up, and you think, right, well, in a traditional environment, I can always look back at how I operated in Lloyd's to understand how I would operate in the family business, and think that's really, really beneficial.
What would I have done if this was white collar and not family and all that kind of thing? Yeah. Okay. Interesting. All right.
Correct. Correct.
So what was your original plan for Sniffers when you joined? When was that, by the way? When did you join the business?
So it's 4 years ago. It's 4 years ago in end of March.
Okay. So what was your original plans, and how are you progressing with those plans?
So our original plan was to get to, so at that time we were turning over about 660k to be exact. Our plan at the time was to be quite aggressive and try to get to 1 million within 3 years, knowing that would help substantiate some of the income that I personally forego and to support my parents.
Yeah.
We hit that number. So year end 17.
Wow.
So way ahead of plan. So that turned out to be really, really positive. And that was by bringing in another arm of the business, which I talked about earlier, which was developing our own brand, Buffalo Natural Dog Treats. So we've got our own IP, we've got our own supply chain. We're building a brand, building a business around that. So that that was a real big momentum swing.
And that's a brand of a product within Sniffers as a distribution mechanism for those products then, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, correct.
Do you want to explain Sniffers a little bit to us, in terms of what it is, what it stocks? So I talked about, I only did it from a crash and burn sort of, from banking to biscuits, really dog biscuits.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of anything else, but, it's not dog biscuits, it's treats and so. Talk to us about Sniffers.
Yeah, so Sniffers Petcare is designed to support the trade, the independent pet trade, with a range of products. We're weighted heavily towards dog treats, dog biscuits, dog snacks, but we do have a sort of arm which covers small animal and bird. We distribute brands, so we have distribution licenses for European brands, Bow Wow, Vitapol. We have our own brands, which are Buffalo Natural Dog Treats, Monster Shocks, and Walter Smith. And we work with the wholesale market and the independent trade to move goods basically from manufacture through to the independent trade and the wholesale trade.
So you're warehousing for trade, and it's online, but people can come and, well, we can't at the moment, lockdown. Can people come to a property and collect like a cash and carry?
Yeah, so we're not quite at that level yet. We're aiming to be then toward the end of this year actually. We're a palletized business, so we distribute by pallets. So we have a big shed. With pallet storage, we pack the pallets up and we get them to customers as fast as we can. I guess our unique selling point is we've got a history in the trade. My family has operated as retailers from I think my granddad purchased his first pet store in the 60s, which was on Tib Street, which was the sort of mecca for pets. At that time, there wasn't an animal that you couldn't buy on Tib Street, so I grew up in that environment. I grew up in the sort of retail pet environment, so we know the trade, and we know what sells, and we feel like we know what sells, and that's evident in sort of success that we've seen in the products we've developed.
And your brands and products are reflective of that in terms of you being innovative. What's next? What's selling? What are people crying out for?
Yeah. There's been a real swing within the market to a focus on sort of natural treats, ears, tripe, even steak is what we produce. I guess our knowledge of the retail environment meant that, in particular, my dad's knowledge meant that we focused on providing them with bulk offering at first, allowing them to break the stock down and almost sell it white label. And then off the back of that, we utilised anything we made out of that to reinvest and build our own brand that we would then come packaged. And has a bit of a craft beer look to it. We've sort of leaned on the sort of craft beer approach to pet treats,
right?
And sort of we're definitely wedded to that idea. I think it's a great way to sort of position the brand.
I mean, they're still going to stand out on an independent shelf, haven't they? They're still going to stand out in I go to a pet shop for pet food for hours, and when you go in, the shelves are full of stuff, so you've got to stand out on there. So craft beer approach is probably not a bad way of doing it. So why is pet care? Why is it such a good time for the pet care sector? You've obviously, I mean, in terms of hitting your straps for end of 2017, and I'm assuming that growth's just continued in that time. Why is it such a good time? Why is there a crest of a wave for pet care at the moment?
I think I'm describing the moment as sort of the golden age of particularly dog ownership. We're going to see the golden age of dog ownership. COVID's changed everything. There's no getting away from that. You know, it's changed how we shop, how we spend time with family, friends, how we spend time in a working environment. You know, I'm sat on my living room table, which, you know, is not necessarily something I would have done in the past.
Yeah.
People have, you know, got dogs. You know, I can count multiple friends who've gone from saying that I'm not going to have a dog to suddenly out of nowhere they've got a dog. Everyone seems to have a puppy. And we've, you know, we know at the end of 19 there were 8.5 million dogs roughly in the UK. We expect that figure to be closer to 10.5 million by the end of this year.
I think the key there is a lot of people have said in the past, we'd love a dog, but we don't leave it alone all day. We'd love a dog, but it's not fair. We'd love a dog, but we can't, you know, look after it, you know, 9 to 5 or whatever. But everyone can. These, you know, furloughs, lockdowns, homeschooling. If you got a dog, you spend time with it and you can take it for a walk at lunchtime and all that. So the dynamics of dog ownership have definitely changed, haven't the people who previously, you know, would have loved one but thought it wasn't fair, are thinking, well, actually, I'm actually 95% of my time is now spent in the same environment where the dog would be. So why not? You know?
Yeah, definitely. It gets you out of the house. You know, you can form a solid routine around it. You know, if you're out walking your dog a couple of times a day, you're going to see the benefit yourself anyway.
Yeah, it's exercise, isn't it? Yeah, and it sort of looks slightly better than just walking quickly on your own, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You never really go for a walk on your own without thinking there's something wrong, do you? But you'll happily go walk with a dog for an hour. So yeah. Definitely.
The thing I suspect about dogs is that their owners have got a habit of spoiling them. Is that right? You know, so
yeah.
Are treats now not seen as treats? They're seen as essential. It's seen as part of the, you know, I'll buy them because we've always bought them, and our dog deserves them type thing. Is that a good thing? I mean, I presume that's
I think that analogy is true. I think, you know, a treat's a discretionary item. You know, following on hard times, you can choose to buy it or not, and that's a little bit of a dangerous place to be in a market, in any marketplace. But I think what we're seeing, particularly on the dog side, is that people are wanting to spend more money on the dog than ever before. But more importantly, they're more conscious about what they're giving the dog. So, you know, we'll exhibit at Crufts. We've exhibited at Crufts for the last 4 or 5 years, and I was doing it with my parents while I was at Lloyd's just to help out.
Yeah.
The amount of questions you get around the quality, where's it sourced, what's in it, you know, how good is it for my dog, is unbelievable, way beyond what you probably ask around your own diet. I personally find quite fascinating.
You'll feed your kids some suspect chicken nuggets or something, you know, in a crispy pancake, but you'll make sure your dog's got.
Absolutely. Yeah, crazy. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. In a good way.
But I think there's more awareness anyway of health. You know, when I take our pet to the vets, you see about, you know, healthy eating and overweight and, you know, exercise and making sure they've got the right balanced diet. So treats are just part of that, I guess, aren't they? To be fair.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that's where we've seen the growth in the market. So you've almost got the perfect storm a little bit. I know, you know, I feel very blessed when I talk around our situation. I'm sure there's many other businesses going through a very, very difficult period at the current time, but we've got the perfect storm of, you know, organic volume dropping into the market and inflating an already growing marketplace. I mean, dog ownership was only growing around, or pet market was growing around 10% a year prior to all this. So God knows where we're going to be in the next 3 to 5 years.
But at the end of the day, I don't think people begrudge businesses doing well. I think they do begrudge, you know, people tub thumping and jumping from the rooftops going, hey, look at us, we're doing brilliantly when other people are struggling. But I think you've got a real what I like about what I've seen about the business at Sniffers is you've got a real humility and a family feel about it. You're not sort of, you know, like, look at us, we're brilliant and we're all that, you know, you're doing well, and you're doing well with the right values, I think.
Yeah, it's good to hear. I mean, you know, personally, we're wanting to build the business as much as an employment vehicle for the local area. That's, you know, that is one of our key priorities as a business. It's not just about piling cash up in the bank. Absolutely not. You know, I understand the importance of the employment sector, you know, in my community in Caldale and Kirklees, and I understand sort of the impact that we're going to see from off the back of COVID. You know, we might not be seeing it now, but, you know, for 12 months down the line, I do worry for the sort of the local economy. So any small piece or any small part I can play in providing employment, you know, to that area, you know, is incredibly important to me.
Well, I really like, I mean, one of the questions I'm going to ask you, and you covered that, is about giving back to the local area and the fact that, but you are a proud supporter and believer of the North, aren't you, really, as a regeneration area? Do we get a fair crack of the whip, do you reckon, up north for, from the media and from funding and from government support, or does it feel as though we're a long way? You've worked in London. Do we feel a long way? Do we feel a long way from decision making in London, in your opinion?
Massive. It's difficult to articulate how far I feel we are away from what's going on. Just by sheer coincidence, I didn't know you were going to ask me this actually, or I didn't look at that question, but I was reading some stats around when they announced the Northern Powerhouse initiatives in 2014 earlier this afternoon. And the GDP of the Northern Belt from Liverpool to Hull is equivalent to the size of Sweden, Austria. These are the tiers that we're working in GDP production.
Yeah.
We do not have the infrastructure investment at the level of those countries, nowhere near.
Yeah.
So for me, that it starts at the basics. It's important that we build the right environment for people to have sustainable employment. We've just been underinvested for years. I'll get on my soapbox here, but I look a little bit about how I even just commuted to work in London. I had the tube, multiple buses every minute allowing me to get to my employer. I actually walked. You had Boris bikes available. Everything that was there was available to help people. Even at the basic need, just get to their workplace efficiently in an environment that is reasonably, okay.
Hang on, I'm
going to look at the train,
but there's still moan about the tube.
Yeah. I mean, I use the term loosely on the tube, particularly being crammed in at 7:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
But if you look at the state of the carriages moving from, Leeds to Manchester, you're at 2 carriages per train. It's 2021. We should be way beyond that.
If you look, the bit that gets me is when we you're allowed out, as it were. I go quite often across to Manchester, but on a morning, every morning. For those who don't know, the M62 queues from Huddersfield to Leeds, 3 lanes every morning, or used to. That's down to infrastructure, isn't it? It's just down to just investment. It's just down to the fact that that's not acceptable. Why would you sit in your car for an hour and a half extra just to get to work? It's ridiculous. But anyway, I love the fact that you're passionate about the North. I love the fact that you're back in the North. And I love the fact that you're working in the family business. What do you reckon's the achievement that you're most proud of so far at Sniffers? And what are your future goals? What do you reckon the end of 2021 will look like, whether it's in product or growth or whatever? What were your achievements first, and then where do you think you're going to be?
Achievement, I don't, again, back to the start of the discussion, I put myself under an immense amount of pressure. I haven't achieved anything that I want to achieve in this business so far.
Right.
So I think what I'm proud of is providing employment. When I started, it was me, my mum, and my dad. We've now got 5 FTE full time within the business. So to develop that, over 4 years is something to look back on and say, and for it to be sustainable. And say, I'm happy we delivered that.
Are you planning to expand within the UK? Do you need another distribution space, somewhere down south to service there, or is it always going to be Huddersfield and northern based because you can service where you need to from? It might be bigger premises, but what's the plan?
So the plan this year is to take a bit of a risk. So we've agreed terms on a new warehouse. So we're going from 6,500 square feet to 22,000 square feet this year.
That's a bit bigger, isn't it? That's quite a leap.
Yeah. So a big leap. We need it, but that gives us something to grow into.
Mm-hmm.
When I joined the business, we were in 1,500 square feet, just about. I remember going to see the warehouse we're in now, thinking, God, if we ever fill this, we've made it. And we're bursting at the seams now, so we're on to the next phase. Where's
the new one, Sam?
So that'll be in Lowfield Business Park in Calderdale, so still very local.
Mm-hmm.
So we're hoping to get in there midterm, and that'll enable us to then kick on. We want to bring in add more brands to the portfolio. Mm-hmm. And provide a wider range to entice more independent retailers to work with us. We know that if we can give them a broad product set, it gives them more of an incentive. we can give them a better discount, they get better margin, everyone's happy.
So you want to be the single source for all of that sort of product range if you can be, because you can, like you say, pass the margin on, and
absolutely,
the breadth of product range. So you got the space to grow into that, then, haven't you? That, I mean, I'm assuming that's the ambition for 2021: get bedded in, get sorted out, make sure.
Correct. Yeah. And as part of that means that we'll create another, hopefully 3 jobs off the back of that, almost straight away. So again, that's a real big tick for what we can deliver in 21.
Quick question for you: when are you going to fill 20,000 odd square feet of? When's the next, like, oh, this is massive, but we're squeezing at the seams? When do you reckon?
I don't actually want to set a date of that, because it's quite terrifying when you think about where you go next. That's the thing about sheds; they come in certain sizes. So after 20,000 square foot, you're probably looking at 100,000 square foot, which is a terrifying size of operation.
Is that several football pitches, that type thing? That one?
Yeah. I mean, we're probably at 2 football. I should know this, but we're close to 2 football pitches. I'm talking rugby terms. I'm a rugby lad.
Either way, pretty similar. It's a standard unit of measure, isn't it? The football pitch. Yeah. I mean, there's 2 things. One is people measure things by the size of a football pitch. Like they'll say an oil tanker, it's 80 football pitches long or whatever. Then they'll say, or they say an area the size of Wales. That's my other favourite one. They always measure the size of, as if we all know how big Wales is.
Yeah, I know. You can comprehend how big Wales is immediately in your mind.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like the rainforest. They've lost an area the size of Wales every other week or whatever it might be. So okay. Well, listen. In terms of the transition from Lloyd's through, like you say, I really like your honesty in terms of, some of the reasons for that into the family business. It looks like it's just onwards and upwards for Sniffers and for yourself. What's the one learning point you want to share? We've got an audience who SME business owners, people just in the sort of business context of what we do. What little bit of advice? And advice is probably a little bit patronising, but what little bit of sort of story would you say? What?
I think it's a lot of it's mindset. You've got to get your mind in the right frame, which focuses on around self-belief. Your biggest critic is yourself. Everyone knows that, and we always hear it, and everyone tells you it, but no one necessarily does anything about it. Or can get over that. Now, it's an ongoing battle, don't get me wrong, but I think once you can get your mindset right and envisage a plan. I mean, I have a massive imagination, which helps tremendously. Thinking about, what business opportunities exist, but what the future business could look like. I can almost see it in my mind, and I'm trying to have a sort of a vision of what the business could look like in 10 years. You can work back, step by step and think, right, well, what do I need to do tomorrow to help achieve that? And those little bits will help you achieve a greater goal.
Okay. The other thing I picked up several times is you use the phrase back yourself, and I think that's really impressive and really important. If you don't back yourself, people might not back you, might they? So you got to at least throw your hat in the ring and say, I'm going to go for this, I'm going to try this, I'm going to, what's the worst that can happen? I think you've done that a few times in your career, and including going to Cheltenham when you should be going for a job interview.
Look, it's not easy, and it's not comfortable. I don't find it comfortable at all. In fact, I hate it. There's always that unease around, am I doing the right thing? What could go wrong? But it's just a leap. Once you get past the first leap, you become a little bit more comfortable. Then you make the next leap, then you become a little bit more comfortable. If you'd have said at the time when I joined the business that we go from 1,500 square foot to 22,000, I would have said that's almost impossible.
You can't even comprehend that, though, can you? Because the difference, you have to go through a stepping stone of 6,000 or whatever. You can't comprehend 1,500 to 20,000. You just can't. It just doesn't look right, does it?
No, and it doesn't feel right, and you've got no idea how to do that. But at 1,500 square foot, you can envisage what a business could look like operating in 22,000 square foot, and then you can think, well, what are the steps I can take to get there, and slowly over time. Each of your activities will compound in enabling you to make that leap. So I think, big thing for me is mindset. The second thing, and I'm terrible at it, is patience. You've got to be patient. I got burnt in my first career by being impatient and ultimately burnt out. And, and I have to pull myself back and just keep saying every day, just be patient. It will happen. Just let it happen. Don't force the agenda.
I want to leave it on that because that's a really positive couple of messages for us, Simon. I'm just going to share the screen for those who watch on YouTube. Most people absorb the content audio, but I'll just sort of share this with people. Most people know, if they're regulars, that you can access the podcast on the IMPACTUS Group website. That leads you to the links for iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, all the usual popular platforms. YouTube's got its own channel for the podcast as well. Literally search the Impact Sessions with Nick Bramley. You'll find it on all the popular platforms. I'll put your contact details in the show notes that go out on all the podcast platforms as well, Simon. But, we've got all your contact details on there visually. So you've got your phone number, mobile, email address, and most importantly, snifferspetcare.co.uk. So fabulous to meet you. Fantastic interview. Lots of energy. Great to see a real pivot without it being COVID pivot, because we're all sick of the COVID pivots, aren't we? So brilliant, Sam. Thank you for being a guest on the Impact Sessions. Thanks for persevering. We had a couple of near misses trying to get this booked in, didn't we? So I'm glad we've persevered, and great to meet you.
Yeah, you too, Nick. Thanks for that. I enjoyed it.
No problem. Cheers. See you soon.